Welcome to Minding the Gap, a podcast of behavioral sciences where we will talk about the mind, the stress that we're all dealing with, and gaps that's created by that stress. I'm Paul Bakke with Behavioral Sciences of Alabama, licensed counselor, and I'm joined by Dr. David Barnhart, fearless leader of Behavioral Sciences of Alabama. Dr. Barnhart, it's good to be with you this morning, and it's good to be on our second podcast.
Hey, it's good to be. It's good to be. It's good to be present. Walking around on the earth.
It is good. One of the things that we talked about last time, one of the references that you made that we use a lot, is the Viktor Frankl quote about the space and the stimulus in space. So I want you to share that with the audience, because what we're really talking about is the freedom to choose how we respond to things that are happening in that space, in that gap, if you will.
Yes. Well, I love the quote. So just to reiterate, what Frankl said was, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. Excellent depiction of what we deal with all the time as we go through the day. And we wish that we could intervene between the stimulus and response so that we could more frequently choose a better response. Now, for most of the time, we're functioning pretty well along those regards. But if we're triggered by something that's anxiety-provoking or anger-provoking or some extreme emotion, sadness, depression, we'll tend to respond in a protective fashion, and so we're more likely to be defensive. We're more likely to either say something or do something that, on reflection, we wish we could have gone down some other pathway. And sometimes we'll avoid. The trigger, there's a part of our brain called we'll just call it the threat detection center. Sometimes, often includes a part of the brain called the amygdala. But that threat detection is about survival. And I think this is such an important piece of information to have, because I think it helps us explain and to think about how we approach situations with each other, or it can, or with our children. As adults, we have a hard enough time regulating our own emotional response to something that is important to us, so we get triggered. And then kids, adolescents, children have even less capacity to do that. Apparently, by the time we're about 25 years of age, this part of our brain that makes decisions and that we try to use to downregulate our emotions becomes more engaged. And I think a good example of this in the real world is that when we turn 25, often we notice that our automobile insurance rates drop. Why? Well, by that stage of life, people reach the age of 25, they have learned to be less impulsive. They have learned to regulate their emotions better.
Less accidents, less speeding tickets.
Yeah, and it's not because insurance companies study neuroscience. They don't, but they do study accident rates, speeding tickets, that kind of thing, and they want to keep your money, so they know they have to drop their rates if they're going to keep you as a paying customer. I love that example. It's an everyday experience. So you ever paid for your own automobile insurance, you were really glad to see that drop. and, now,
And we talked about that last week about how for younger people it's just more difficult to stop and think, without being impulsive. But even for past 25, it's still difficult because we're all assessing things, and one of the things that our mind does is it's getting that trigger, and it's the feeling is happening inside of ourselves, and we have to detect what this means very, very quickly. Okay, so I gave this example. I've talked to you about this before, but there was earthquake, back in early 2000s, something like that, and all of a sudden I was at my dinner table, and I heard the door bang or the house shut, and I trigger happened, and I immediately thought somebody was charging into the door.
Yes.
I mean, I just, my mind had figured out that somebody was bolting into the door to get us. And I instinctively turned around and bolted towards the door in through the other room, and took a return and ready for whatever. And there was nobody there. Okay. But my mind assessed it, figured it out. And the decision was, do I wait here and be scared? You know what? Well, I don't know what's going on. Or I go and get this thing, whatever it is, before it gets me and my family, right? It was brave. It was just survival instinct call to action. So our brains are assessing and trying to figure out things. And that's where what I want to talk about really today is the whole idea of, we get this thing happen. Somebody says something to us. We read an article. We have just any kind of experience. We're driving in our cars, and we have a feeling that's strong, that's related to it, and we instantly come up with, we're trying to make sense of it immediately, and we don't have all the information most of the time, and we can really develop an opinion or a thought that's not true, that may be reinforced, and it may be unhelpful to us in terms of our own selves. It might be we're not good enough. If certain kinds of things, it might be this person's my enemy. Could be this person did the wrong thing. They're a bad person because of this. But we come up with all these quick assessments, and then we go with it so often, and it leads. And now in our society, we have Twitter and Facebook, where we can have an opinion, a really strong feeling, and an opinion about something that may not be based on all the information. It might be just something I heard on the radio, or I thought, and then I can put it on there, and then I get people to support me on my on my side of it, or I get an argument with somebody about it. And so I wanted to talk about the process, if you could kind of share with our listeners and viewers, of how it enters our mind. There is the space in between, but it gets filled up pretty quickly with sometimes the wrong information, and we end up responding in a way that widens the gap, if you will.
Yeah. So part of this quick opinion formation has to do with pattern recognition. So again, this is all wired in and automated so that we survive. So fundamentally, it's about survival. And it's not that we have a bunch of people walking around with character flaws. We are the product of our set of experiences. What we've been exposed to, what we think about, what we read, what we hear, and all of that, our cultural ecosystem has an impact all the way down to the atomic level, if you will, in our brains. So we are responding in the way that we've learned, and so when there's a little bit of information, our brains will, like a good statistical predicting machine, predict what the next even the next scene should be, or what I should be hearing next. And so we can formulate an opinion very quickly because of pattern recognition. Like today, I think the most obvious things today is if you are on one side or another politically, the tendency would be, if you meet somebody who is introduced to you as being on the other side of your whatever your side is, you are going to generate a certain expectation in terms of that individual. And so the brain makes this immediate pattern recognition, and we assume what we know about people. And interestingly, and I think I wrote a post about this at some point, but we could, if we show up to the same, if we were showing up to football games anymore, if we showed up at the same football game, rooting for the same team, we could be sitting right beside somebody who's from the opposite political spectrum, and we wouldn't have that pattern formation. We would just see them as, oh,
You're on our team.
yes, you're on our team.
We're for the same team.
Exactly.
Yeah, and at the same time, you can also have two people who are on a different team.
Mm-hmm.
They have different colors. Alabama, Auburn. Okay, Alabama
Mm-hmm.
fan. Okay,
Yeah.
and the referee makes a call, and it goes against Alabama, and the Alabama fan says, "Come on, ref! What are you doing?" And the Auburn fan goes, "That's a great call. Good call. Yeah, he was holding." We have all these biases that are already, that it's been reinforced over time.
Yes.
Bias has been reinforced over time, and based on what our belief system is in the moment, who we're rooting for, it's just kind of a funny example, but it happens all the time. And
constantly.
And I was talking to you earlier about this. I got really, really upset this weekend about. I'm a big football fan. Just really enjoy football.
Now this is a guy that actually was a baseball player.
Yeah, I was. I'll tell you the story about that. Okay, so I played football when I was in fourth grade. I played 1 year, and when I got older, I was always smaller. I was always not a big guy, and so when I got older, I got fast. I could really run. So baseball was sport that I could play where I didn't have to be big. And my speed helped me a lot. But when I played football in fourth grade, I was small and I wasn't fast yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a good combination. It's a bad combination. I got killed. I mean, I was a running back. I'd get the ball and I did not have a chance. I couldn't run away from anybody. I couldn't do it. I just got pummeled. And it's the only sport that I ever quit. I said to my mom, Mom, I just can't. I just don't want to do this anymore. And I quit in the middle of the season. I was just done. So ever since then, I've had so much respect for people who can play that game, because it is so hard.
It's crazy.
And the athleticism and So I just enjoyed watching it. My whole life. I just love it. But so anyway, so now being a big fan, I pay attention to the news.
Mm-hmm.
My wife went to Mississippi State, so we're kind of Dak Prescott fans. Plays for the Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
Well, recently he came out with this issue where when COVID hit, his brother had committed suicide. He couldn't get out and talk to people and be, he's a people person. He couldn't, and she's dealing with all this stuff and just got unmotivated and probably didn't know he was getting depressed, and he was anxious. He couldn't sleep. And so he was going through all these things, and he talked about it in kind of a recent interview. Okay. And so most people who, hear a story like that, they go, "Oh, good for him." he was honest. He talked about his struggles. He was able to work through. He talked to a counselor, talked to his family member. He recognized in the interview. He said, "I recognize that sometimes we get overwhelmed. We just can't do it by ourselves." And I reached out for help, and it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this guy who comes on the sports talk shows that where they're trying to get reactions, and they're trying to say really big things that get a reaction out of people, and they know a piece of the information, and they act like they know everything. This guy comes out and criticizes him for coming out with it, saying he's a quarterback. He should be a leader, and he showed weakness. He shouldn't have given in to the depression. First of all, the truth of that is, as we know, is that when you're in the midst of anxiety and depression, you're in protection mode. Mm-hmm. You're not feeling right, and so you're not just necessarily going to go get help immediately. You might stay in bed longer, or you might be unmotivated. You might, just feel bad. There's a period of time where you just don't know what to do because you haven't felt that way before.
Right.
Or your brain is not working correctly to be able to think rationally about, hey, I need to, even though I don't feel like working out, even though I don't feel like doing, I need to do this anyway because it's going to, you're just in protection mode, right? Survival mode we've talked about. So that's number one. So criticizing someone for having the problem doesn't make any sense. The other thing is, he reached out for help. He's kind of an example of, it's okay. We have this mental health, mental illness bias.
That's how you take charge. That's how you do something about it. Yeah.
Well, we have, a stigma that's attached to it that we want to get rid of. We want to say, it's good to be able to talk about getting help, and that this is not a bad reflection of my weakness. This is just what's happening to me, and there's no shame in it. So to discourage someone from talking about it, being an example, being a role model for guys who are supposed to be tough and bulletproof, they're not. It's great. It's a great example. And so for somebody to take a piece of information and to discourage that, and to criticize, not to just criticize that. He should have gotten help early. And first of all, you don't know what he did because you just read a part of this interview.
Right.
But that's kind of what I'm talking about with what we're dealing with now, is we have Twitter and Facebook where we can, see somebody's opinion and hear, and we don't get all the information. And it's upsetting because it can be very dangerous to people who normally wouldn't talk about that.
Right.
Because if you listen to that guy, you'd go, oh yeah, he shouldn't do that. Shouldn't be vulnerable and act weak. And says who? So who says that's correct? Anyway, that's kind of an issue that came up. That's really an example of assessing something quickly without really having all the information, and how that's a really extreme example that we can all go, that's, most people say that's not a good thing to do, and why I'm not listening to that guy anymore. But for all of us, we all have these biases, and we all do those things that are maybe a little more subtle, that we're not going to come out on a TV show and say it, but we have these things that we can be critical of, and we need all the information first. And that's really what this podcast is about. It's about encouraging people in this political climate that we have today, encouraging people in the pandemic that we're dealing with today to stop and think fully about how we're going to respond, because in that response, as Frankel says, we have the power to choose and be free and grow.
Right.
As a result of that, the instinct is to instantly react to a piece of it based on an emotion and a piece of information, and so we have really the privilege as humans to be able to stop and think rationally and make decisions that's that can close those gaps instead of do things that just disconnect us. My rant is over.
Oh no, it's good. It's good. I like the rant. It's a good rant. So yes, we need to really work on this stigma issue, and the National Alliance for Mental Illness has been working on the stigma idea around mental health, mental illness, suicide, and so forth. It's a big deal. This is hard. It's not easy to catch ourselves when we're triggered, and so the skill set that we try to teach people through counseling and psychotherapy is to start looking for the triggers, and even when we do something like keep a stress log, where we're trying to see where does my stress get peaked during the day. If I go to the trouble of doing that, then I'm actually training myself, the kind of the non-conscious part of my brain, in addition to the conscious part, to pick up on the triggers more quickly. So I start getting better recognition of a trigger, or even the antecedents, that is, the things that lead up to a trigger. I get better at doing that. And so, going back to one of your favorite sports, football, if you watch a quarterback take a snap, and they've got, I don't know, people who weigh 240, fast, or 300-pound linemen coming after them, defensive ends coming in. I mean, you got all these people trying to come in and sack you, and you have to make very quick decisions so you don't get creamed.
Yeah, and the instinct is, oh crap, and then you can't focus on the routes and those kinds of things. And so they've got to be able to practice tuning out the threats that are coming around them, and tuning them in enough to be able to shuffle around and move in the pocket and to be able to make their throws. But the normal thing, that if I was back there, I would go back to pass and go, don't kill me.
Exactly. I'm going to be getting down on the grounds where I'm going to get. Well, so they do so many repetitions.
Right. Under duress, under stress.
Exactly. With crowd noise.
Yeah.
They simulate it when they can't get it, So they do all of these things, get a lot of repetitions, so that quarterbacks become able, and other backs that play other positions do this too. They're able to read quickly. They can read and react, and that's the phrase that's often used, read and react to the situation. And so what you'll see is, I don't know, maybe within 1.75 seconds, the quarterback reads several different things and is able to get rid of the ball almost all the time. Mm-hmm. Almost all the time.
The ability to process that information that fast,
very quickly,
under stress, takes a lot of repetition and a lot of practice. And that's really what we're talking about with our thinking and with our little biases and the way we respond to things, is to practice thinking prior to being under stress, and then also maybe sometimes in the stress. We talk about if a child is having a hard time with something and there's some kind of a situation, we practice it with them. Practice starting to have getting angry and doing the thing that you don't want, and then practice calming themselves down.
Exactly.
In the process of not getting what they want. Let's practice not getting what you want. And so they're a lot more likely to be able to do that. And it's most people just don't think that way. They go, right. I just hope it's better next time.
Right, exactly.
It's the same thing. It's practicing thinking more openly. It's practicing knowing what kinds of things are out there that get us in trouble. And I was watching again. I'm a big Titans fan, so the game the other night, first half, one of their best players, after the play, guy pushes him. That happens all the time. He responds, punch in the face, out of the game.
Yeah.
That's automatic. You throw a punch, you're out, right? And so
Yeah.
I've said this too. I've talked about talking to my son's baseball coach at where he plays college baseball. That if I was coaching now, I would be putting players under that stress and having them practice. When somebody pushes you, the instinct is to retaliate.
Mm-hmm.
I would have them practice getting in their faces, trying to provoke them, and them not doing anything because it's more likely, because it's so natural and it's instinctive.
Yes.
And then when people go, oh, I can't believe he did that. He was so selfish. He hurt the team, and they criticize somebody for retaliating.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see how you respond when somebody gets in your face.
Exactly.
And pushes you. Let's see how you respond in that.
Well, it's the natural
when
response.
You're already hyped up. When you're already hyped up, you're already trying to make a play. You're already kind of in combat mode. Really, the only way people are going to learn how to downregulate in those moments is to literally practice that. And my dad was involved in theater. He was professor at University of Memphis, was next to the theater department, so he knows people. And there was a guy who was an actor that the police department hired to get in the police officers' faces and provoke them and do all this kind of stuff, so they would learn how to respond. And that's back in the 70s. I don't know if they do that anymore, but that's a great strategy for dealing with a stressful situation, is practice that condition and responding in a way that's thinking, that's not necessarily reactive, and that's just gets us in trouble, because once we're hyped up, it's hard to do that unless you've really worked on it beforehand.
It's paradoxical. So what happens with parents, and it seems wrong, but this is in fact what we do. If we've got a child that's having difficulty with self-control, and they're having tantrums or rages, whatever, in response to the frustrations that they encounter as they go through the day, what we do is we teach parents how to work with their children so that the child will respond with, like, for example, have you ever seen a 2-year-old with a cell phone in their hands? Probably. So they've got this thing, and they learn really quickly to move this stuff around. And the parent says, I need my phone back, and the parent takes it out of their hand. The kid's going, wah, so they have a fit. So they could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10. I mean, it goes up. 14-year-olds do the same thing. So how do you teach a child to respond differently? Well, you have to practice, and so just like we've been talking about repetitions in football. Fortunately, it doesn't take quite as many repetitions, but it does take more than one. Almost nobody learns with one trial. We're not good at something. You shoot a basketball trying to hit a free throw. If you just get one shot and you don't practice it, it's a very low probability you're going to make it. You might know how it's supposed to look. You may have an idea about what you're supposed to do, but unless you get enough repetitions, you're going to not be that good at it. Kids are the same way. Adults are the same way. So if we want to change a pattern of behavior, we actually set it up and we simulate it, just like they do in football plays. Quarterbacks going through these repetitions, crowd noise, what you're talking about, Paul, getting in somebody's face after a play and learning how to respond differently, so that you don't lose it, in a national championship situation. We need repetition, and we need practice being able to have pattern recognition, right? So we're trying to use what we know about how the brain works, and we're utilizing that. We're not saying, well, you're a bad child because you have a tantrum. That's not logical. Somebody might say that might be the way they've learned to respond to that kind of thing. But we recognize that we're the product of our environment. And if we want to go down a different pathway, we really need to set ourselves up as adults, so that we are more likely to respond in the way that is conducive to better relationships.
And part of that practice is really for all of us to recognize that whether it's somebody that's over responding with anger, whether it's a child or an adult, or whatever the situation is that's our tendency is to make a judgment about them, about good, bad, that's what's going to happen. We can easily say that if a child's having a tantrum, that's not a good thing for them to continue to do. We don't want to reinforce that. It's not good, but it's not about them being good. Right. It's really they're responding in a way their brain is telling to them to do in that moment, and they need to learn. They need to learn. So they need empathy. They need understanding that, right. I'm not going to yell at you for making this mistake. I'm not going to yell at you for crying. I'm not going to yell at you for, responding in the wrong way. I know that this is part of your development. I know that you're a human being, but it's hard to separate that. We talked about that last time because, we can be more patient with other kids, but with ours, they don't know better, mine. So we have to recognize our own quick judgments that come in that may, like we're talking about, widen those gaps, and encouraging people, all the people out there listening and watching, to think about those situations and to prepare for those situations and to practice those situations. Why? Because it helps. Because it helps bring people together. It helps unite people. It helps solve the problem.
Yeah, so we can see that we have we're on some of the same teams, depending upon the circumstances. So we extend what we just talked about with children to adults, where we have an us and them. So we're part of this tribe and they're part of that tribe, but we are all human, and we do have common ground. If we automatically categorize somebody in a particular way, then we're not open to whatever good idea they might have. We have a cognitive bias that puts them in a different category, and we're not even able to communicate with them because we've created these different kind of categories in our minds.
Well, we've talked about the book, The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. Talks about moral reasoning and the psychology of it, and in terms of how political issues become sort of divided, and how they're different. Different belief system that emphasizes a certain value and that certain value, and how a lot good. The whole idea is that a lot of really good people have all these different points, and that we get into combat mode when we start talking about your point against my point, because I'm right and you're wrong. It's it's really a different belief system, a little different value system. But his point, overall point in it was that recognizing that everybody has something important to say. Yes. Everybody has something important to say. That there's not many people out there that just wake up and just decide to be a jerk because they just want to be a jerk. There's not, there's most of us are trying to do the best we can with what
Yeah.
we got.
Right.
One of my old mentors used to say, we got this little red wagon and we got all this stuff in it. And we're just pulling it as hard as we can, to
Yes,
get through life.
we
We're all
are.
doing that.
Yeah.
Dr. Warren Wilson said that to me. So I just always remember that. But it's just, we're all just trying to do the best we can.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing that in the beginning is important to relationships and closing the gaps like we want to do.
Yes. Well, we'll talk some more about that.
All right. Yeah. Well, it's good. It's a good second session.
Yes.
Look forward to continuing.
Me too. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks for watching, everybody.